Eric, go ahead. If you're ready.
Yes, welcome everyone. Lovely to see those of you I see and to recognize the existence of those of you that I can't actually see, but Zoom tells me you are real. I'm excited to that we get to share the long poetry issue of Irreantum in this verbal way. One thing about, I think it's fair to say all the poems is that they are not merely visual entities, that they are much more alive as once verbalized. I know Stan has done some readings of his, and for all I know, maybe others of you have as well. And it just seems like the natural way to do this, and the great way I think to introduce people to the concept of long poetry, which is not particularly the most 2023 of types of writing, but I think this issue proves that it's alive. And I'm really grateful that Michael Collings took on the role of editor for it. I wish he could be here with us. And I'm grateful to the poets who participated. We're going to go in the order in which the poems appeared on in the issue. I'm putting the link to Michael's introduction into the chat. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there is the table of contents, and you'll be able to see the poems in the order in which they originally appeared. And with that, I think that is sufficient introduction. The poets have about 5 minutes apiece. They're welcome to say whatever they want and to read a section of their poem. And then when we get to the end, anyone who's on the call is welcome to engage us in conversation. And so with that, Makoto, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. It is a real treat to both have been included in Irreantum and to be here with y'all. So I'm Makoto, she, her pronouns, please. I contributed Emma's Crown to the long poetry edition, which is a free verse poem, perhaps best termed a kind of historical fiction, which attempts to follow Emma Smith immediately after the martyrdom of Joseph to the end of her life, and then a little bit beyond that. I've decided to read from the last section. The whole poem is split into either 4 or 5 sections. I really should have counted before, but they leap from scene to scene with often years spanning in between. So we're going to take up what I think is one of. Well, I've tried to choose a representative moment that captures the many sort of emotional tearings that are at play. This is a poem that is simultaneously trying to deconstruct much of what we think about with early church history and Emma and her relationship with the Restoration, and then attempting to reconstruct it a little bit. The goal is not to just tear it down, but to try to leave us with something that feels true to the history, but also allows us to imagine ways through what is undeniably complex and painful in many ways. I think this manages to capture some of it, though perhaps ends. Well, I'll get right into it then. It's hard to summarize, and I don't envy all of y'all who have such incredibly rich poems that we're going to be talking about. So this starts right after one of the line breaks. Joseph, Emma calls out. Her son rushes to her side, but it is not the living prophet whom Emma sees. Mother, young Joseph says, Mother, what is it? Joseph? Emma can feel her body growing colder. Or is she imagining it? It has been so long since she saw Joseph's face. Young Joseph holds her hand tightly. Her son, their son. She is so proud of their son. Would Joseph be proud of him too? Even though they never went west, did not feel safe with Brigham, could not stomach the celestial marriage, could not bear to abandon Nauvoo, could never dream of leaving Lucy. Lucy is dead and buried now, her bones with her son's bones, to rise together in the resurrection. Joseph? Emma can see his face clearly now, his blue eyes, gentle smile, now his torso, still with the stomach he got in Nauvoo. And suddenly, the bed, walls, ceiling, house, young Joseph's hand and hers are gone, and in front of Emma just stands Joseph. Emma stares at Joseph, Emma, he says to her, I am sorry I did not return to you. He looks contrite, elated, sobered, overjoyed. He looks torn in two Josephs, one wishing he could hide from her, one wishing he might never leave her. It is Joseph. Emma feels herself move closer to him. She is not really walking, but she doesn't know how else to understand the experience. And she stands very close to him, and she cups his face in her hands, and she begins to smile because he is her Joseph, because she is with her Joseph again, because she always knew, no matter how many John Greens or Brighamites or reorganizers said otherwise, she knew God had blessed her enough by putting Joseph in her life. Joseph, she says, and her voice breaks, and somehow she is crying, and somehow her bodiless being tenses, and somehow she wishes it was instead Joseph holding her, and though she clings to him, she looks down, away, ashamed, and before Joseph can ask why, Emma tells him, I lied about you, Emma says, shaking her head as the years flood back to her. I only wanted to protect you, protect our son, she says, and she starts to shrink away. I'll leave it there, and thanks everyone for being here.
Encourage you all to clap in the comfort of your own homes. What a beautiful reading. Thank you so much. Is that Nauvoo behind you? I was just noticing as you were reading.
Oh, yes. I believe this painting is somewhere in the Church History Museum. So there's Nauvoo behind me.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Part of the great tradition of Latter-day Saints reimagining the past. And we also have a great tradition of imagining the future also, which is a good segue to Steve Peck's poem. So, Stephen.
Hi, good to be here. And I'm impressed with everyone here and just overjoyed to be a part of this. I'm just going to read it and maybe comment if there's time. So here I go. The poem's entitled, Are Not Two Sparrows Sold for a Farthing? The old woman says funny things as we pass through the glassy towers. I like walking with her to hear the stories she tells. The day moon is bright and near full, and she has me describe the lost gods' houses. They glow softly white and cool. We know they are haunted, so we duck and pass quickly. The woman is the only one not afraid, but she hurries too. She says she could see as well as I can when she was young. Not now, I think. Joab would leave her because she uses up water, but she is good at catching sparrows, not afraid of their wings. When she cooks them, she always says, Are not two sparrows sold for a farthing? I ask her, what is a farthing? She only smiles, but will not say. Maybe she doesn't know. She tells me that once when she was a little girl, some of the gods' houses were filled with fire bricks, and they did not burn them, but used them to remember stories. I like stories, but I do, but she believes the fire bricks have stories, and the fire bricks she carries and will not let us burn, she uses to tell us stories in the night. We do not understand them, but they bring us some comfort in the bright heat of the night. We walk across the middle bridge, and Joab looks far down the sandy trail under the bridge. He is good at finding water. And on the other side of the bridge, we go down to the sandy way and start to walk. The walking is hard because our feet sink in the sand, slow going. The old woman works hard to keep up. Her breath gets fast and she doesn't leave. When the night comes, she would die without us. The places Joab says to dig are wise, and we almost always find water. He is wise and old too, but not as old as the white-haired woman. He does not tell stories and does not believe the ones the old woman tells and says they're all lies. But she can catch sparrows, so she gets to stay. The moon had just set when Joab told us to dig. We all do. We dig fast because the sky is starting to lighten and the night will soon be on us. And if we don't find a place soon, the son of the night will come and the houses of the gods are still around us. Job is good at finding ways under too. He is wise. We find water and fill up our plastic jugs. We must all carry two because it's Joab's rules. And even the old woman who finds it hard carries the same share of water. Joab leads us under, even though this place is new. He knows how to find under better than anyone. And we go beneath the houses of the gods, and we are not afraid because the ghosts stay above. We go under just in time. In every gathering of the gods' ruins, there is always an under left for us, I think. The old woman says she knew the gods, and they were not gods. Joab says that is a lie. I don't tell him that I kind of want to believe the old woman. She is never afraid of ghosts. Joab says that she is a fool. I don't think so. We go deep into the under as the night heat follows us down. We follow the cool. At last, I help build a fire. We want coals in case the old woman finds sparrows. She leaves, she goes alone. I ask her why, and she said, if I show you how to find sparrows, then you won't need me. So she goes alone. Perhaps she uses farthings to find them. We use fire bricks and a piece of wood Lucasel found yesterday under a guard car, wood large, round as a thigh. When the fire is going, I hope hard that the woman finds sparrows, not just because I'm hungry, but because I know Joab will be mad and might leave her if she doesn't. The wood and the fire bricks would be wasted. He does not like her. I think he hates the lies she tells about when she was little. They make me less afraid of ghosts, like she is not afraid. And I'm glad when she returns. She has 6 sparrows. They come to the under when the night sun rises. You can see the bones in their wings. Their furry heads and flat noses are strange, and their little feet grasp your finger as they flap their naked wings. There is one sparrow with a baby hanging on tight in the soft fur of its belly. Joab claims that the baby sparrow is his dinner. He smiles at the old woman, and I'm glad. We kill them and cook them over the coals. Their wings are crispy and the meat sweet. We all are in a good mood, even Joab. He says, see if there is a story in your fire book, old woman. She pulls out the bag, which has always been with her. It usually hurts her eyes and her head when she finds us the story. The night sun is so bright there. Is a bright white light patch on the hard gray floor, finding its way to the under. She opens the fire brick and stares at it while we wait. She finds a story in her fire book and speaks about a tree that a god called the Lord of the Vineyard tries to save for something. He digs about it. Joab laughs. Why would a god dig about a tree? Dry as bones they are. He should collect wood. There is no water under the tree, old woman. You make me laugh. With that, he goes to a corner to sleep until the night is over and the sun goes down so he can leave the under and walk again and begin again, or looking for what the heat does not destroy or the night sun dries up. That's it. I made it through.
Thank you, Stephen. I love how the structure of the poem, like the identity of this, or the further details of the sparrows and the identity of the fire bricks don't really reveal themselves to the end, and it changes everything I thought I knew into a completely new direction. So it was a great play. I envy everyone who is just hearing it for the first time. Like, it's one of those things that reading the first time is a very special treat.
Well,
if you're new, yeah. I'm adding the table of contents again. Scroll down below Michael's introduction. There's a table of contents in the chat. Our next poet is not here today. We're skipping Mark Benyon, whose poem about the 8 days, Thomas is the one who hasn't seen the resurrected Christ. Good poem, but we're not reading it today. You have to read it on your own, which means we're going to J.S. Absher. Stan, would you like to read to us from Nephi on the Tower? Oh, you're muted still.
There we go. Can you hear me now? All right. Feel like a phone commercial. Nephi on the Tower is based on Helaman 7 through 10. I'm going to read from 2 sections, 2 of the 14 sections. The first occurs just after Nephi, from his garden tower, has prophetically announced the assassination of the chief judge. This section interrupts the narrative to meditate on prophecy and history. At the end, it resumes the narrative by repeating the end of the previous section, which is a scribal technique that's found in the Hebrew Bible and the Book of Mormon. Nephi's certainty. And he saith unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. Revelations 19:9. He knows this certainly, for the word has suddenly come to him. History is God's daughter, and he braids her hair from innumerable strands. She thinks it's the wind blowing her tresses into a frightful tangle, and cries out, What can be done but pull it out by the roots? Yet it comes right at the exact moment it needs to come right. Hair pulled back from the face into a modest bun, showing eyes red with pain at the crucifixion. When all the strands are brought together, Son, behold thy mother. As it will come right at the exact moment it must come right, when the tablecloths are spread, the tables laden with choicest foods, and the joyous guests arrive, at the feast planned from the beginning, when the bridegroom, quiet as a thief, approaches, and the bride, radiant as the sun, comes out, every strand plaited, each in its place, la tresse africaine woven with blood-red ribbons. From the agency of the righteous and choices of the sinner, from the iron bands of law and chaos-tangled lines, God weaves times and places that the man of God with certainty can say, Go and find the chief judge murdered. Go, cry the crooked judges, 5 in the crowd already running. I'll skip now to the last section. Towards the end of writing this, I realized that the French repetitive forms are a pretty fair way of rendering the Book of Mormon tropes of repetitions. So this one begins with a rondeau. Benediction of light. The spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of his being. Proverbs 20:27. Dear light, from the Creator's face you feel the immensity of space. To all things you are the law and life, the power that made them all and makes for each a place. In you the rabbit runs, the fox gives chase. By you we judge the righteous from the base. You show our virtues, ticks, and flaws, dear light, and show us to the path of grace. You are the beauty of our days, the snowpack trickling in the thaw. The leaf is red as Christ's blood in the fall, that neither grief nor failure can efface, dear light. Now, shine in our minds, though darkened by sin's shadow. Plant eyes in our souls to see with the Lord's eyes, that we may do as Nephi did, who came down from his tower, not blinded nor silenced by fear, willing to be a fool before our God. That we may do as he commands, pledging to him by covenants the energy of our desires, the work of penitent minds and hands, that we too may witness and sacrifice as long as love and hope require. That's it.
Thank you, Stan.
Yep.
I'd like to pause for just a moment in the progress and tell a little bit about the genesis of this issue, because it's kind of Stan's fault. He sent a previous draft of Nephi in the Tower, and it wasn't quite ready for showtime, but it was so good. And I said, Stan, we gotta get this thing ready. And I sent it to James, who's going to read next, and I sent it to Michael Collings, our editor. And I don't know if Michael ever got back to you at that time, but James did. And James was also working on a long poem and proposed the idea of this issue. And I said, well, I love that idea, but is anybody writing this stuff? 2 people is not an issue, really. I mean, maybe, it could have been, but we put out the call and people responded, and Michael was gracious enough to bring his expertise to the editing. Fun fact, if you go through old issues of Irreantum about 20 years ago, Michael edited a long poetry section of a special poetry issue of Irreantum in the paper edition. So if you want the link, reach out to me, but it's out there. And I think it's great that 20 years later, we're doing it again. And maybe we don't have to wait 20 years next time for the next one. But yes,
Can
please.
I add something before we go on? So James and I had I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hour conversation by phone, and he made immense contributions to my understanding what I needed to do to finish the poem and improve the sections that were already written. So it has its current shape, really, thanks to many people, but James in particular. So thank you, James.
That was a good talk.
It was excellent.
Well, James, as co-founder of the feast, will you read for us next?
Yeah. Yes. So Stan also read my poem, Song of the Salt Sea. That's kind of this, it's the 100th anniversary. This last year was the 100th anniversary of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And so I was thinking about that poem a lot and kind of interacting with it. And so I'm going to read a section, it looks like not quite halfway through the poem, called Broken Cisterns. Drink the lakes dry and lick the dust. Drink the lakes dry and lick the dust. Ozymandias built a dam in the South Country, turned canyons to a carrying pot. What kind of man commands the waters? Only an idol or a god. The floods rose up to the rainbow's feet, and then great was the fall thereof. Drink the lake dry. Old Ozzy sketched out another plan. He was getting kind of senile, see? So he promised to dredge out Utah Lake and paint in pavement. Parable or parody awaits some future poet there. Look on my wreck, colossal and bare. Lick the dust. In a thirsty land, it seemed a waste to let fresh water reach the great salt lake and drag to sediment. So we wrung out streams and starved our sea. Oh God, have mercy on efficient sinners who keep golf courses green and sow cash crops until arsenic kisses air and we reap the whirlwind poison. In the coal mine, the canaries are coughing. Strangle them. Peace, peace, breathe deep, eat, drink the lakes dry and lick the dust. Then said I, Lord, how long? And he answered, until the cities be wasted, and the houses without man, and even the land be utterly desolate. And my layman heart could not believe, but in Lehi dreams I saw God called Behemoth in judgment against us to slurp up the rivers and strip the land. His bones were bars of insatiable iron. I felt myself dissected in his algorithmic eyes. Ah, how the crowds competed to be swallowed by that great and spacious beast. Our wills fodder and feast, we ants before an archon. And there was none to protect, for we had dragged Queen Sabbath from her throne, splintered the spear, its shaft of Sabbath years, its head of Jubilee, once used to keep the beast at bay. We have forgotten how to rest, and we are prey. Then God called Leviathan from the deep, with surging waters and fervent heat unseen since the Jurassic. He is drawn toward burnt offerings of creatures long dead. With his tail, he smashes cities, stirs up hurricane tsunamis, sapphire mountains melt before his breath, and his jaws are stretched out still. We sprint for them. Head first, heedless in an ecstasy of excess, step on the gas man, kill the canaries. Burn this scroll, Jehoiakim. Burn even the spaces between the lines. And then I'll read just the beginning of the next movement. It's called The Fullness of the Gentiles. Even the sun will burn to ash someday when days have lost their meaning. Already beneath the bare feet, continents circle, cycle to collide, mountains rise like grain for river gleaning and to be swallowed by the sea. Time winds and wears, its fingertips pitter patterns on the back. Conquerors are conquered, cicadas hatch, that textured touch insistent, dark and light. Let the night unfold, the body slow, ola tras ola hasta cubrirlo todo. O Son of Man, why weep for Lazarus? Why shed tears for Jerusalem when the sun sets? Not one stone can stand. In the Kaaba's corner, pilgrims hand smooth over cracks. Even the black stone breaks in tectonic time. The foundations of pioneer temples shift. Speech goes all babble before the weather gets weird and the monsters come. Nawi Osalatl, Nawi Ehekatl, Nawi Kiawadl, Nawi Atl, Nawi Olin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. When I first read James's poem, I was so amazed and impressed, and that I even went and reread The Wasteland, and I still didn't like it. But I like James's poem a lot. This can't leave that room. Like can't be known that I'm not a big fan of The Wasteland. But one thing that James and I have talked about in the past, and I think this is really evident in the Bible, it's really evident in early church history, and I think it should be evident now, is that poets have a certain task that is perhaps parallel to that of the prophets, but poets have an advantage that prophets don't have. Like, prophets have to be right, but poets just have to be true. And I think that's something we see in quite a few of these poems, is that the writers on this call are exploring really interesting truths and presenting them to ways that we haven't seen before. And that's one of the great values of poetry. And that's certainly true of the next one, Daniel Cooper's Dante poem, which I have to admit, when Michael sent me the final list of all the poems we're going in, Daniel, I read yours last because I did not have a great experience with Dante in high school. And I was pretty nervous about reading yours. I was like, I'm afraid I'm not going to like it. But I think yours is the one that I have told the most people about, because there's certain elements of your imagined afterlife that have really stuck with me and are presenting something that I feel is really important. And that, I think, is one of the beauties of the poems. And I mean, in the poetry that we're publishing in Irreantum and elsewhere all the time. But I think this issue, it's particularly clear that there's real value to the imaginative power that poetry has. So with that, Daniel, I'll give the time.
Thank you for that introduction, compliment. I am just going to read, just start at the beginning and just read a section of the first canto. So first time I read Dante was actually when I was at BYU. I never had read it before. I was an Italian major at BYU, so it was a class that I took. And whenever I took it, I thought, there should be a Mormon Divine Comedy. Why has no one written a Mormon Divine Comedy? And then I waited and I waited and I waited, and I finally realized maybe I should just write a Mormon Divine Comedy. So I have much more time constraints than Dante, because I'm not living in exile and spending my years just writing and writing. So I chose 3 cantos rather than 3 whole canticles making a book. But the first one is sort of the introductory, and the second one goes to what we call Spirit Prison and then Spirit Paradise. So exploring the spirit world with Dante. Okay. Halfway through my mortal journey, or so I thought, I found myself in a dark, dreary wood, a dull wilderness so overgrown that nigh the sun was at its summit, and still I could not see but few paces before or behind. I sought in vain to go the way I thought should lie the trail, but only more gloom did I find. I couldn't see the straight path I had strayed from. Long had I believed I knew the way, but blind I was from the very start. In this darksome forest, I could neither go back nor advance. All my great knowledge and learning was, in sum, a set of trinkets I now looked at askance. I was lost and knew not whither I should go. It seemed that I was doomed when a sunny lance pierced the gloom. Whence came the beam I did not know. The misty chains of darkness were torn from me, their hold broken as the light began to grow. I walked the now clear path to an emerald lea. Sunshine warmed the breeze that round about me whirled, and I knelt, wept tears of joy on bended knee. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the spirit world, said an accented voice I had never known. I stood, looked. A man in robes, furled and unfurled by mild, tender wind, stood on a cobblestone road, watching me with smiling eyes. Who are you? I asked, surprised. He said in a gentle tone, Amigo, I have been sent to help you do that which God wants you to do while in this realm of spirits. I will help you and guide you through, but the journey is yours. You are at the helm. I will merely give aid where aid is wanting. The pursuit of learning and knowledge can whelm the mortal mind. Your mission may be daunting, and I will be with you at every stride as a guide, a comrade, a friend, not taunting, but helping you, serving you, right by your side until the day comes when your journey is o'er, your lessons acquired, and then you decide to go back to the earth, that far distant shore, where the greatest teacher is experience, to live and to grow till you're ready for more. Thus finished his speech, I marveled in silence, then asked him, but who are you? What is your name? Forgive me, I almost forgot. From Florence I hailed, and in life I attained some small fame. Dante they called me, Dante Alighieri. I stared stupefied. Not a single word came from my mouth. For quite some time I did tarry, staring until I felt awkward. Then finally I spoke. Wait, you are the Dante Alighieri? Florentine poet who wrote so divinely, master of language, of the popular word? And I'll just stop there.
Thank
And then they
you.
continue on and they go to the different places and have their journey.
And it's a fun journey.
I had fun writing it. It was a good time.
Excellent. All right. Well, I am next in line. This is the first time I've submitted something to Irreantum since I took over the editorship, because I was hopeful that Michael would not remember I was the head editor. I don't know if he did or not, but he did accept my poem, and I am grateful. About a year ago, I read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight for the first time, and I had thought I'd read it before. It's not the first time where I read a classic and that I thought I'd read before, but I clearly had not. I read Simon Armitage's translation, and I loved it a lot, and I really wanted to write something in that style. And so between Stan and James and Michael, I had this opportunity, and I adapted a short story I had published several years previous. I'm going to read Fit 2. Like any good epic, my poem begins with the crucifixion of Christ and is heroic and takes us through to Joseph Smith, all the way down to a ward in Oregon where there is a noble bishop and there is a dragon that a sister calls and complains to the bishop about. And as we all know, in the Doctrine and Covenants, it says dragons are the responsibility of the deacon's quorum. And so he calls the young men's president, and this is the beginning of their dealing with the dragon. Matthew Mamawala makes his way westward. His primary pickup was wee President Wilkins, then on to Turgood Avenue to the Pilner's place, where sister and brother squabble over who shall sit in which seat. Once settled, this SUV swiftly sweeps southwesterly, soon arriving at the abode of Sister Carolyn Carter, and as she will tell, one D word, dragon. Outside, all is peaceful, all is calm. Her yard is green and healthy seeming, yet peacefulness can, at times, be surface only. Councillor Terre lay casually collapsed upon bicycular handlebars. He waves to wee President Wilkins and assembled soldiery, but Carolyn Carter's concern could countenance no delay. A dragon, she deemed a higher degree of demand, and she raised both hands, requiring her audience's regard, then rendered her troubling tale towards them. Told too quickly or too hysterically, she feared they'd quickly dismiss her or laugh, but she knew them not. A dragon, cried Carolyn Carter, a dragon! Gray it was, and orange, pink, and red, and long as a house cat or two, 3 squirrels or 5, and at its withers, tall as a young raccoon, lithe but not slithy, too slippery for sunlight, reflective, radiant, repulsive, it could curl its cursed copse clockwise and counter, swerving its sinews round and around posts and plants, verily vanishing as soon as spotted, and leaving behind as evidence only the tattered bulbs of tulips. She held out her hand, revealing a benighted bulb, iridescent claw marks clearly revealing a dragon's touch. Wee President Wilkins, Harry, and Melinda gasped and trembled, pushing forward to place their fingers upon these traces of terror's touch, gray as they were, and orange, pink and red, and the sun shone off them like the sea. Dragon claws are sharp. Claws and cuts they leave are holy, deep and unholy, and sharp is the deacon who takes care. And thus begins their noble quest to rid one sister's garden of a dragon. Thanks. And now, our grand finale, Brother Bruce Forbes, the time is yours to wrap it up, and then we'll move into questions and comments.
Going last, and you convinced that everybody before you was so good. I'd like, I think it was Daniel.
Bruce, sorry to interrupt. Before you start, be as close to the mic as you can.
Luckily, I don't know where the mic on my computer is. I'll just lean in here. I am a great fan of epic poetry. I, like Daniel said about Dante, I've always wondered why hasn't Latter-day Saints written heroic poetry? This poem was my first attempt. I thought it turned out pretty good, and since then I've written 3 more and published them. But this one is called The Tree of God's Own Love. It's a retelling of the vision that Lehi and Nephi both had of the tree of the love of God. I took my cue from Nephi about likening the scriptures to myself, so I wrote this as if it was a vision I was receiving. I'm going to read bits of it. The first part I'd like to read is where it actually begins. I'll skip the introduction, but then the person, the narrator, has found himself alone before somebody comes to help him. He says, "At first I stood alone upon a dark and dreary wilderness, with naught but stars to guide me on my way. It was a wild, untrained, unlawful world in which I stood, like those who do not think that they need to seek for something more than just the dirt and worms of carnal, natural man normality. I prayed for rescue, and there came a man with robes as white as untouched snow. I thought I might have known him from some other day. Perhaps I crossed his path as hunger or a thirst. Perhaps a storm had brought him to my door. I did not recognize him, but he smiled and softly called my name aloud. Fear not, said he. I helped, I pressed, I rose against the storm did comfort me. And now my Father's love is waiting to reward the heart that freely gave its solitude. I still had yet to fully understand the nature of this man of sin, of whom the prophets prophesied would come, and show the way and teach the truth and give his life to be a lamp unto our feet. But I, in faith, went with him anyway." And if you know the story, he gets taken several spots, and eventually he gets to where the tree is, and that's where I'd like to read a little bit. "Emerging from the darkness into light, there was a large and spacious field, as green and lush as the fair wastes had been a waste. A cultivated field it was, wherein the soul found calm and rest and nourishment. And in the middle of the field there stood a tree, but not just any tree. The tree of life itself, it seemed to be. So bright it was that driven snow would have appeared as though it spray. So bright the noonday sun seemed shadowed by its light. Beauty beyond all other beauty I had ever seen. Desirable above all other things, most joyous to my soul was just the sea. Behold the love of God, he said, who led me on, which spreads abroad to bless the hearts of all mankind." I'm going to jump to where he was talking about the desiredness of the fruit. He said, "This fruit I found desirable and sweet, above the taste of any fruit that could be offered in its place. If heaven's light and knowledge had a taste, if God's own love and grace and mercy were experienced as it would be, I might attempt to cast a stone at you with the fruit of which I think. Every poem has got to have a little humor to it. I found for humor was when he looked and the great spacious building was there. So I'd like to read that part, and then I'm probably over time. Okay, the people got to the tree, they were partaking of the fruit, but they were becoming ashamed. But to my horror, there were some who then did cast their eyes upon the ground as if they were ashamed. What could have shamed them so? The nasty, noisy neighbors had arrived. I heard a noise much like the noise of war, much like the noise of man while shouting out their own philosophies and teachings, as if speaking in the place of God, much like the mocking laughter wicked souls do make when justifying their actions, as God's own light shines bright enough to show them the harm of all their ways. So loud and winded was the noise of war that sounded from the great and spacious building hovering beyond the village gulf, that it did seem to me that it was lifted up above the ground by all the heated air. This nightmare skyborne palace, filled with men and women, old and young, all dressed in mankind's best and finest covering, it mocked and made a jest to those who stood about the tree. And I tasted of the joy and peace that those who laughed and mocked will never, ever know. The pride and wisdom almost of the world might guide and stay its way. Inside of that Leviathan is every vain imagination that will carry pilgrims, so of course that they may never see the light of things in heaven's court. I hope, Lamb, that it remains upon its own side of the great dividing gulf, I cried. It does, I was assured. Now keep this warning well. Do not in any circumstance believe it is a safe and prudent thing to hitch a ride within a house that has no sure and strong foundation, tossed about by every wind of fraud-filled doctrine, craftily prepared to take you on a breeze-blown voyage of no return. There, I better end because I'm probably over time. It was very fun to write. I'm glad I did it. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everyone had fun writing their poems. All right. Andrew, I don't know if people have the power to unmute themselves, or if we're going to have people raising their hands, or if people are going to throw stuff in the chat. But let's have a conversation. Anybody who would like to comment on anything you read or heard, feel free. I imagine it will be easy to keep the line orderly, so I'm not going to stress about it too much. But
Yeah, everyone has the power to unmute themselves. So go ahead.
If I may, if it's all right for a poet to be with the first, it dawned on me, I can't believe it hadn't before, but today I was reading the poems right before we started. It dawned on me that Daniel and I have accidentally created the subgenre of poems that go to the spirit world, and you meet a really famous person from history. And I was sort of curious what what it was like trying to write Dante, trying to lay some kind of attempt to say what this person might say, and from the poem, it seemed as if Dante is also sort of there to be you, right? To point out the structure of the poem, the choices made to be poem rather than prose, and that Dante's defense of his sort of pseudepigraphical vision is in turn a defense of this pseudepigraphical vision. It was just really striking because it made me think also about to what extent are the words I gave to Smith, to Joseph, how much is that me trying to find the right mouthpiece for what I said? That wasn't much of a question, but I just thought it just really struck me, and it was a part of the poem I really enjoyed. It also just seemed like you had fun making Dante come to life. It was fun to read that.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to sort of have Dante be kind of like Virgil was in the Divine Comedy, like offering a bunch of explanations and driving the narrative forward. But I also, in learning about Dante, I kind of wanted to write him more like if he's in the spirit world and things have changed and his whole perspective on life has changed, then he would have sort of a lighter mood. And so I tried to, have him like be funny, and because I feel like if there's no humor, then you don't really have happiness, right? So now that he's really truly happy, then he can just be lighthearted. So I tried to put that in there too.
I have a question for Steve. I've thought about emailing you many times about this, but it seemed like a question you wouldn't want to answer. So, or might even be really annoying. So what better time than in front of a bunch of other people? But like the leader of your troop, I noticed you called him Joab, but it's spelled like Job, and my theory was, and like, so I had two theories. Now I have a new theory. My theory is like maybe it was a typo that Michael just accepted as what you meant, but I thought it was like Jacob without the C because he can't see. But I'm just wondering, like, am I overthinking this? Yeah.
No, you hit it. In fact, it was Jacob for a while, and then it didn't feel comfortable when everything else had changed so much to leave the name the same. So I took off the C. You were right. You saw through my ruse. So well done.
I feel good. By the way, poets, a couple interesting things were thrown in the chat that are worth looking at. Anybody else who's here who's not a poet want to jump to the front of the line? Like, we would love to let you cut before we start talking to each other.
I have a question for anyone can answer this, but where a lot of these poems have historical or biblical references, I wondered how much research you go into doing that, and how, like, I mean, obviously, you know, with Dante, and Dante himself does that in his own works where he's referring to other writers and historical figures. And so I wondered, like, in my own writing, poetry and prose, I wonder how much I want to do that, like, if it makes it less accessible to people, but also I think it can enhance it, because then when people do get it, it adds depth to that. It adds other layers of meaning when you have those references. And so obviously when you have an audience where, you know, you have the Mormon theology and history that you can tie in, that's already a layer of meaning there where you have that narrower audience. But how much research do you do? How much do you want to tie in, or how much do you worry about that? That's something I worry about sometimes with writing, of how, like, do you worry about it becoming inaccessible to audiences or not? Yes. Or what's that process like, where it's like, oh, I'm doing all this research for just one line, and is that too much? Or I don't know.
I could jump in and answer. Somebody wrote once that they could search for 2 weeks to write a paragraph. I have never done that before. One of the things that I like to do is things like the poem that I read tonight. I put a lot of footnotes. You learn so much that you can't. I will put footnotes. And you learn as much from the footnotes as you learn from the text.
Thank you, Bruce. Any of you other researchers want to jump in? Yeah, Stan.
Many years ago as an undergrad at BYU, I interviewed a Welsh poet whose name I'm not going to think of right now. He had written this wonderful poem. He's mostly known as a BBC producer, but he also wrote some very nice poetry. And it was a geological poem, asking, well, how did you know all that? Geologically, so I researched it. And I was, I don't know what year I was in. I thought, oh yeah, you can research when you write poetry, of course. So I've found it helpful to me. So I used a number of things I'd already read and some additional things I read to write Nephi on the Tower. I'd read Sorensen's Mormon Codex a few years ago, and I remembered a lot of details that I found useful, and kind of at the beginning of the poem placing it in Central America. Not because I really I don't know where it occurred, but that just seemed like a helpful to give it a particular geography with. Then I looked up some of the flora and fauna to give it a little bit of, that's not necessarily in the Book of Mormon, just to give some local color, as it were. But I found that, to me, that's helpful, and doesn't, obscurity is a different question, really. If you make the poem learned, it might be obscure, but the point isn't to be learned, I think, is to be well informed and to be grounded in a certain way. So the technique of resumptive repetition, I learned somewhere along the way, and I used that in the end of the section I read, the first section I read. I like to do the research. If the poem doesn't turn out, I've still got the research, right?
Yeah,
On the note of research, I just wanted to say that sometimes I think you just got to start, because I used to get really bogged down by thinking, oh, I don't know enough to write this. Like, I have this idea, but I have to do all this research. I'd spend time doing it and doing it and doing it. And finally, I would spend so much time doing the research on the thing that I'd sort of lost the drive to write the thing about that I was doing the research for. And so then I now just decided, just jot down ideas that I want to have in there, and I start writing, and then I will come back and use research to edit and fill in things where there's things missing. And I've found that helpful for me to not get daunted by the research that has to be done.
James?
I just wanted to second Stan on research and obscurity being two separate things. Because like my novel, The 5 Books of Jesus, researched a ton and then wrote it in a way that people can follow scenes and that sort of thing. And the research is sort of this winking aside, right? To somebody who's interested in that level, they can, you know, it points them towards some other texts and questions, and you can choose to engage or disengage. This poem is also extremely obscure, and that's a separate choice, right? So, and I don't know, I mean, I think sometimes it's useful, like, as a writer, all language should be available to you and you play with it. And if you choose to do the extra step of making something accessible, there's something to be gained from that. But if you choose to go the opposite direction and just have particular ideas aligned for somebody who is willing to dive in deeper and work on a hard text, I think there's value to that too. So it's not like one or the other, but yeah, they're not necessarily the same question. You can have a deeply researched thing that's highly accessible and a less researched thing that's more elusive or idiosyncratic and difficult for a broader audience to get. And I think there's value to both.
Yeah, I'd just say I'm in agreement with James. It just depends on the situation, but a lot of times I'll go into fairly deep research. My little novella, The Gift of the King's Jeweler, I read 3 books on the archaeology of ancient Babylon to get ready for that. And I don't think it added obscurity, but it did give it kind of a flavor that gave it some authenticity, I hope. Anyway, but I didn't really go in. For me, the research itself created the space where the writing, I think, actually flowered from that. It colored the choices that I made in almost every turn. And so if I feel like, a lot of times I write my poets based on what I already know, but sometimes I'll dig in. I think in my first collection, there's a poem about John Dee, the magician from the 16th century. And I spent a ton researching him and his methods of scrying, and it was a blast. So for me, sometimes the research is the funnest part of the poem. And even if the poem squanders in obscurity, I get to take that with me.
Thank you. Oh, Makoto, go ahead.
Oh no, if I may just close with I don't know how different this view will be, but so for me, it's been so fun to hear about everyone talking about research. And as far as the obscurity question goes, I think the way James put it is really good, that you sort of, what I've tried to do is have elements that are a wink and a nod to those who know. Like parts of the poem are lifted directly from historical texts, from historical sources. Emma's interview with Joseph III, the first portion where sort of Emma remarks that my husband was my crown. Like that is stuff that is like direct quotes. And then other sections are imagined dialogue, sort of invented. Obviously, the spirit world is invented. Those conversations with the quote unquote reorganizers are based on events, but the dialogue is created. Something that the different part is that I did not do much research to write the poem. It's that I had learned all this about Emma and Joseph and the 1800s and the church. And this poem was like, in many ways, an attempt to try to process this. I suppose it just comes from, I'm trained in history, not literature. And so creating this poem was, that was really the learning experience for me, sort of thinking of a way that felt respectful and right and true, but that was more flexible than a paper would have been, able to go further beyond the text than some colleagues might be accustomed to.
Thank you. Great question. A lot of insightful answers inspired by it. We probably have time for one or two more questions, I would say. This is the time to ask.
In his introduction, Michael Collings said that in the late 20th century poetry journals have rules about no metered or rhyme verse and no submissions over 25 lines. I was very surprised by that. I mean, I know, of course, there's this trend towards, free verse, but to totally, not have these poems at all accepted, is that true? Is that an exaggeration?
True.
It's true. I thought, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals. So the variety of what you can submit is really wide. But a lot of journals do say no rhyme. They don't necessarily say no meter, but no rhyme. We won't even look at a poem that rhymes. And a lot of them have rules like 35 lines, including breaks between stanzas, but not including the epigraph, but not including the title, or something like that, because they want it to fit on the page, and they want to be less troublesome in the copy editing and typesetting the poems. So, but yeah, long poems, even in long poems, are hard to place.
Yeah, borderline impossible.
Yeah.
There was a different publication. I had shared this poem with a few people in Mormon studies, and I'd been like, where does a poem like this even go? And I was pointed to some places, and one of the publications even said, I'm sorry, we just can't accept something like I liked it, but we just can't accept it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in modern poetry in terms of doing things that are unusual and new and different, and that's kind of what those rules are supposed to inspire, but not necessarily, right? Because I edited a Quatrain Fish for 5 years, which only published poems no longer than 4 lines, which was a similar issue, because there's nowhere to place really small poems either. We only want medium-sized poems. That's what the market's for. So that's one of the things I loved about this proposal, even though I wasn't sure it would work. If it did work, we would be publishing things that nobody else was, and we did, and that's exciting.
Oh, warning, I've written 4 or 5 more long poems since that one. So
Time for you to start your own journal.
I don't think so. But the next time you do that, I'll be ready.
All right, last question.
I worry about making this the last one, but I was curious, what is it, Theric? You have The Deacon and the Dragon was already a short story, and now it's a poem. Is it like picking your favorite child? Which is the which is the story. Because they are slightly, they're subtle, there are some subtle differences, or at least some subtle expansions that take place between them.
When I started working on The Deacon and the Dragon, I really wanted it to be as long as Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, even though it only takes place in like a couple hours. I wanted like each moment to be like 10 pages long, and I didn't do that, and it's probably for the best. But you're right, they are different, and they had to be different because they ended up being different things. But I have to say that I really love that I don't usually revisit works like this, and I love that there's two versions of the same thing, and different parts of each one make me laugh. And it was a really valuable exercise to see what I could do with the same story 2 times. And if nobody's done it, I think it's worth trying out. Like, take something that you've done that you like and just see what it looks like in a different form. It was a really interesting exercise for me artistically, and I'm glad I did it. Thanks for the question. But since that was about me, I definitely want to have another question if anybody has one. Poets, you have a question for each other? Well then, thank you very much. It has been an hour, and I don't know about you, but I had a delightful time. I'm glad this will live forever on YouTube. Thanks to the Association for Mormon Letters for their monthly book club. I hope everybody comes back next month for Rachel Ruckert's book. I just found my copy. I bought it for my wife for Christmas. Lost it, did not give it to her. I just found it still in its Amazon envelope under my 6-year-old's bed. So it's been discovered. I have a chance to get it read now. So, and if you don't have a copy, they're out there. You can find one. So tell your library to get one. And Andrew, any AML words of wisdom to finish things off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Theric, and everybody, and for Michael for editing it. Yes, indeed. Our next meeting will be for the book club is February 19th, 7 p.m., discussing Rachel Ruckert's memoir, East Winds, A Global Quest to Reckon with Marriage. And Rachel will join us to answer questions about the book. It's getting a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement about this book, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So I look forward to talking to everyone about it. Also, the call for papers for the Association for Mormon Letters conference is up. I don't have it in front of me to see the date, but we'll be holding that in late April is the conference. So I hope everybody's thinking of papers that you might give there. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for playing, everybody. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for you had 2 things, I know. You had another thing, so thanks.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe I can still catch part of the other one.
Oh,
So.
I hope you can.
All right.
Bye.
We'll see you later.